Now, the US military says it's begun a new wave of strikes against Iran after resuming its blockade of Iranian ports. Iran said the Strait of Hormuz would remain closed until the attacks end, whilst President Trump vowed to strike bridges and power plants unless Tehran returned to talks. Well, the Geneva Conventions on Humanitarian Conduct in War prohibits attacks on sites that are considered to be essential for civilians. So attacks on civilian infrastructure could be considered potential war crimes. Our correspondent Barbara Pletasher has more from Jerusalem.
What it essentially is a battle over control of the Strait of Hormuz, not over the country. But it is escalating. So the ceasefire deal was supposed to set the stage for negotiations to end the war. The Iranians were supposed to open the strait to shipping. The Americans were supposed to lift the naval blockade on Iran, amongst other things. And the deal did talk about Iran having some kind of role overseeing the strait, although it was quite vague. But the Iranians said that means that we can keep control of the waterway. The Americans said, no, absolutely not, it doesn't. And so they have been increasing their airstrikes on Iran. Iran has closed the strait and said it will stay closed until the bombing stops. But now the Iranians are also threatening to possibly extend their own attacks to other routes that are used for oil and gas shipping. And President Trump is threatening to possibly order attacks on civilian infrastructure like power plants and bridges if Iran doesn't do a deal, which could be considered a war crime. But so far, he has not made a decision to resume all-out war, but he hasn't found a way to end it either.
Barbara Pletasher there. Let's get more on this with Ali Weiss, Crisis Group's Iran Project Director. Thanks for being with us. How serious is this escalation in your view?
Well, it is very serious because already not only the ceasefire is over, the memorandum of understanding is on the verge of collapse. Its last standing element was the U.S. naval blockade that now has been restored and is in place. So at this point, if the two sides continue climbing up the escalation ladder, I am afraid all-out war is just around the corner. And if the floor, which is the memorandum of understanding that is less than a month old, collapses, then it will be so much more difficult to build any kind of agreement that would bring this to an end.
And what is going on to try to stop that and to resume the diplomatic track?
Well, not much at this moment. Some of the mediating countries, like the Qataris, are still trying to bring both sides back to the memorandum of understanding. The differences in interpretation were supposed to be resolved with deconfliction mechanisms, which unfortunately didn't take shape and didn't become operational. But it is not too late to try to bring both sides back to the negotiating table, because honestly, the alternative is not only worse for them and the rest of the world, it also has already been tried and has proven completely futile. The US and Israel bombed Iran for 6 weeks, and it didn't change Iran's position on the Strait of Hormuz. So another 6 weeks of tit for tat or even an all-out confrontation will come with a high price and a lot of risks, but would not fundamentally change the picture.
And in terms of the likelihood of all-out war, which is something that, one understands and imagines that neither side wants, if that happens, what's the impact?
Well, the problem with this round of all-out war would be that it would be much sharper, probably, than the previous rounds, because both sides have learned lessons from the previous conflicts. Both sides know how to inflict maximum pain on the other side. And yes, it is true that President Trump threatens to target Iranian infrastructure. But towards the end of the 40-day war, it was Israel that had started doing that, not the U.S. And so the U.S. still has the possibility of moving in that direction, which the Iranians would retaliate by torching the entire infrastructure of the Gulf states. And that would create the kind of economic shock that would push the global economy into a recession and would create food crisis in East Africa. It would be a disaster for everyone. In addition to the fact that this time around, we're likely to see not just one critical choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, being shut, but also Bab el-Mandeb, the access from the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea, also being blocked by Iranian allies, the Houthis in Yemen.
I think you've written a piece saying this could be a forever war, something that President Trump was voted in to try and end.
Well, absolutely. But the problem is when you have a minimal understanding, like the Memorandum of Understanding, which is just a page and a half, and all it does is that it ends the war and opens the strait. It deferred all the substantial issues to the future. If you can't even keep up with that, it took 2 months to negotiate it, and it's now falling apart in a course of 3 weeks. Then basically, it's a formula that for diplomacy not delivering results, which also means you're going to be in perpetual cycles of violence.
Ali Vaiz, thank you very much indeed for being with us.
My pleasure.